To order our town board regular meeting for September 9th, 2019 at 7:07 PM. Ms. Iker, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christine Olivas,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett, Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Mr. Wilson, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration. Are there any new items of business? If not, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda tonight as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson, approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is approved as presented unanimously. Moving on to item 4, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. I have no update on the historic preservation since we met last time. The tree board is hosting an event, an evening with the tree board on September 24th at 6 p.m. at the Recreation Center. They're going to be recapping their sick tree day, discussing the emerald ash borer and the Japanese beetle, and I would encourage everyone to go. I believe there's a $5 charge. They reviewed their annual goals for next year, and those include library programs with Weld and Larimer County. I think they host them at the library in Weld and Larimer, come every other month or something like that. They're offering another spring workshop like they did this year, all their Arbor Day events, Sick Tree Day again, another fall evening with the tree board next fall, and they're going to complete an urban forest assessment on all our urban forests. So that's what they plan on doing next year. They'll be busy. It's a great group of people, and they're very active, so I appreciate that. That's it.
Okay. Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
Parks, Recreation, and Culture, we meet tomorrow night, so I'll have an update next time. And just want to thank staff for all their hard work and dedication over the Harvest Festival. The town, especially the parks, looked great. So not just Parks and Rec, but the entire staff. And then with the Poudre River Trail Corridor, their main event and fundraiser is Thursday night, this Thursday, September 12th, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Poudre Learning Center on the west side of Greeley. Tickets are $35, and I have some with me if anybody is interested.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I've actually been at a meeting most of the day today. The Chamber of Commerce had their very first strategic planning session today. We met for over 5 hours. We had complete board participation in our lengthy discussion about new initiatives that the Chamber of Commerce can do, fundraisers to ways that we can support the local business community. It was a very productive session. We have a lot to digest and debrief from. But the Chamber of Commerce is looking forward to, through our President CEO, to start to implement some of the suggestions and comments and ideas that were put forth today by the entire board. So that should really conclude my presentation at the time.
Okay. Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Windsor Housing Authority is going to be meeting next week. Currently, they're in the process of putting together a job description for a full-time maintenance person for Century 3. For the last several years, one of the board members has been overseeing that pro bono, more or less, to make sure all the maintenance gets done on that facility. And now they've decided that they need to, first of all, he wants to retire from that responsibility. And so they will be looking for a full-time maintenance, I guess you'd call supervisor, to take that over. Great Western Trail Authority met last week. Again, the ongoing property line dispute was a big topic for discussion, and we've been meeting with our attorney, the trail Authority's attorney, getting together a game plan for approaching the owner. Actually, there are several owners that are affected by two different surveys that were conducted, one in 1905, one in 1991. And this is holding up proceeding with construction of the trail. So again, ongoing, hopefully get resolution in the next several weeks. That's all I have.
Okay, Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Mayor, nothing to report on the Planning Commission. The Library Board had a meeting of its board on Thursday, last week Thursday, and it was mostly updates on the strategic planning, some discussion around the efforts and future schedule. They've extended it, then the strategic planning meetings will continue almost through the end of the year before they do a final recommendation to the Library Board from the advisory group. Probably the most notable thing, there's 2 positions that will be open on the Library Board effective at the beginning of next year. They've already announced that those positions are available and open. They're accepting applications. So I would urge anyone that might have an interest in being on that Library Board to go to their website, look for the application materials and submit. We hope for a healthy, robust set of candidates.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority. I don't have anything new to report. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, September 18th. We also are having a strategic planning meeting that is prior to that. I'm trying to see exactly when that is. My calendar. I think it's the Tuesday before our meeting. Yeah, it is the Tuesday. It's on the 17th. We'll have a DDA board retreat, kind of talk about 2020 and the future, and then we'll have our meeting on the 18th. North Front Range MPO did meet last Thursday in Severance, so a couple of things to report out there. We approved the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan and the readoption of fiscal year 2020-23 Transportation Improvement Program. We did finally receive the approval for our RAC appointment that we had made with Mayor McLeod that we had in front of the governor since last November. And finally got the letter that he is finally approved. The approval came just last week. So now that he officially sits on that board as a voting member, as well as we have 2 additional board members who are representing on RAC as well. We have William Karspeck, Mayor of Berthoud, and we have Kathleen Brackey, who is a new Colorado Transportation Commissioner who's joining them. Mayor Ross and Mayor McLeod did testify at the ZEV update opportunity to testify. Obviously, the ZEV was approved, but they did voice their great disappointment going through that process, as most of the testimony came from out of the state of Colorado, and were people who were paid to be there, unlike Mayor McLeod and Mayor Ross, who gave their testimony in opposition to the ZEV mandate. However, that didn't make for approval. This Thursday, we do have a grand opening, a groundbreaking for Segment 6, which is part of the I-25 improvement project that's meeting along there. And I'm going to talk about a few things because we had a very lengthy presentation from the RAC office that presented on us about what everybody's hearing about right now as the serious non-attainment status that Colorado is going to move into. But a couple things to note about that status. Number one, the reason why we're moving into serious attainment status is because the threshold, they keep raising the threshold that we have to meet, because in actuality, and this is quoted by the RAC, we have reduced 75% of our ozone reduction has been reduced from the oil and gas sector since 2011. And 25% of our emissions from NOx emissions has been reduced from that time period as well. So actually, our air quality has been in improvement. So it has made a huge, massive improvement. The reason why we are moving into that is not because of things getting worse, but it's because the threshold keeps rising. And actually, there were many folks in the group who voiced the opinion of there's a outside source that could be quoted, that the governor had the option of putting us into an international quota status, and he opted not to do that. That is 0.5 parts per billion. Our threshold is that we need to reach a 70. We currently are averaging at 79. Had we had that 0.5, we would be within the threshold realm. Because right now, 40 to 50% is outside of our control as to what we're seeing in terms of emissions that are coming in to our area that we have to account for. So it was an interesting and lengthy and good discussion. They are reevaluating the standards when they put all of these initial numbers together in 2011. So we've asked them to come back to present again, which is in about 6 to 8 months, when they've gone through the process again to see if it affects any of the numbers and the presentation that we've seen, as well as at the end of this year, we're supposed to get a report back from the state, from the Air Quality Commission, from the state as well. So the board asked for them to come back and make a report back on both of those cases. So just some interesting things in terms of what we're hearing and what we're seeing basically in the media versus what we are actually presented and told in the meeting by the actual RAC representatives and folks who were around that table. I also want to talk a little bit about Coalition 25, which I attended last week as well, because while we do have that additional money secured for the I-25 project, that additional $310, I wish, $310 million, that we also realize that we still need another $350 million to complete segment 5. And so the MPO is going to be drafting a letter because we asked Commissioner Brackney what was needed, and we had our new Region 4 CDOT Director, Heather Paddock, was present, and both of them voiced that we need to continue to voice to commissioners, to voice to the state, the importance, especially coming from Senate Bill 1-267, that we still need money allocated to I-25. We know that $367 million has been allocated, but that still is not enough to complete what we need to complete to do there. So MPO is going to be drafting a letter that the council is going to sign, but I also would urge, and I would urge even our board to, when that letter is drafted, and I encourage every municipality to sign that letter as well, to give to our commissioner, Kathleen Brackney, to be able to show that we all stand and we continue to need and want additional dollars, so we can make sure that I-25 project is complete and becomes whole at some point in time. So that'll be coming hopefully out in the next hopefully in the next week or so that we can get those letters signed and then moved forward. That completes my report for the evening.
Madam,
Yes.
on the additional 310 million, is that for the Johnson Corner to?
Yeah, so that
lines?
one has been approved, and we know that that money's coming, but segment 5 still needs 350 million. That's not included in that 310.
Segment 5 is that stretch from Johnstown South?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Did the MPO board take a position on the ZEB program?
We did not take an official position other than there were several council members who wanted to go down and testify, and there were enough board members who agreed that and elected Mayor Ross and Mayor McLeod to go down and make that testimony
Yeah, I was just curious.
on behalf of Northern Colorado.
Thank you.
Item 5 is public invited to be heard. We don't have anybody who signed up this evening to come forward, so we're going to move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. This evening on the consent calendar, we have minutes of the August 2016-2019 board meeting and report of bills for August 2019. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Consent calendar is approved unanimously as presented. So moving on to our first item of board action, item C, is a public hearing. A public hearing for Legends Sports Park Metropolitan District Service Plan. Legislative action. Looks like we're going to start presentation from Mr. McCarter, and then we will have special counsel Carolyn Steffel will also come forward. But I would seek a motion first to open public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer, the second from Mr. Wilson to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now open. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening, you're convening a statutory public hearing to hear evidence in support of the future Legends Sports Park Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 and 2. This district, or these districts, are proposed to serve an area that should be familiar to you by now, the area that was formerly Diamond Valley Park and is now under the control of the future Legends Sports Park organization. The service plan was presented to us roughly a month or so ago, and was immediately referred to Ms. Steffel for review because we know that the districts would like us to consider this on a fairly accelerated time frames, which is why we're hearing it tonight. And if approved on first reading, it would come back for second reading on the 23rd of this month. That allows the districts to meet some deadlines for elections. The district's lawyer, Bill Ankley, and Ms. Steffel worked cooperatively together to get the service plan in the condition that you see it this evening. And Ms. Steffel is more familiar with the details, so I will ask her to come forward and explain what's before you tonight. And then, of course, we have Mr. Ankley here to answer any questions on behalf of the district. I understand that there are also folks here from the development wing of the sports park in case there are questions of them. So we should be able to make a complete record this evening. Bear in mind, this is a legislative public hearing. It's not quasi-judicial, so ask whatever questions come to mind, and if we need more information, we're happy to provide that if necessary. So let me find Carolyn, if she is. Good evening. Carolyn provided you with a memorandum which was included in your packets, but perhaps give her some time this evening to explain what she saw when the service plan came in, how she and Mr. Ankley were able to work out her concerns, and then the concerns that remain, if any.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. So I did provide you with a memo that has some of the key points of this service plan and also talks about the ways that it differs from the model service plan. And I can go over some of those points real quickly for the record. It does propose to organize 2 metropolitan districts, about 50 acres apiece of property, and they would be for multiple mixed uses, but all commercial. Are proposed ball fields, a stadium, indoor athletic facilities, hotels, dormitories, and commercial uses. The property is proposed, the districts are proposed to have the ability to issue mill levy up to $40,750,000. $750, yeah. So I did have a typo in my memo, and Director Soslavsky pointed that out. I appreciate that. The debt mill levy, the debt limit would be 40 million, not 42 million. So they're proposing that the public infrastructure that they would finance would be about $32.5 million worth of public infrastructure, and that it would be primarily repaid through taxes. The mill levy limit is the same as for the model service plan. It's a 34 mill limit for debt service and up to $39 million for operation and maintenance and for a combined mill levy. And that's, those are the limitations that are contained in the model service plan. Then it also proposes that the debt is repaid through some developer-imposed fees. And one of the things that we worked on with the district's representatives is to try to clarify what those fees would entail, because the first proposal was a little ambiguous as to whether the district would be imposing the fees or the developer. So what is proposed is that these fees would be set by covenant on the property, and the developer would be collecting the fees. One would be a fee on all lodging transactions, and one would be a fee on all sales transactions just within the district. And so the district does not itself have a sales tax power or the power to impose a fee on the lodging. It would be a covenant imposed, collected by the developer, and then they would pledge it back to the district. Another question that we asked for the developer is, how will we know that this fee is going to be imposed or that the developer intends to impose this fee? And that led to the letter that was included with your service plan that is from the current developer of the property, Future Legends LLC. And it does say that they intend to impose a project retail fee and a project lodging fee, but if they determine not to do so, they understand that the debt capacity of the districts would be limited because they'd have less revenue available. So it's not a promise, it's not a pledge, they're not at the point of having done the covenants yet. So that is a future step down the road. And you can ask the district's attorney more if you have any questions about that piece. Based on the financial plan that they have included, it does show that they would have ability, that the districts would have ability to discharge the debt up to that cap of $40 million, $4.75 million. And in fact, it shows that they can even go above that, up to closer to $44 million. That does include the revenue streams based on both the developer fees and the mill levy. It does not include a capital improvement fee. It also does include specific ownership taxes, which are distributed by the counties based on the mill levies that are imposed. And that was the reference to SO taxes, as to specific ownership taxes. Okay, let's see. So how does this vary from a typical model service plan? It follows your model service plan very closely. Some of the changes that the district's organizers have asked for, one of them is a relaxation on the limit for the capital improvement fee. Under the model service plan, there's a cap of $2,500 per home of a capital improvement fee. The model service plan doesn't have any cap for commercial developments, and since this is commercial, they ask that there not be a cap on that fee. However, the financial plan doesn't anticipate that there be a capital improvement fee. So again, that would be a question for the district if you had any questions about that. Another change that they asked for was as to the term for imposition of a debt service mill levy. So under the model service plan, it provides that from the time of development and the time that they start imposing, the district start imposing a mill levy for debt service, they have 30 years to impose that mill levy. So in this case, since it is commercial, the district's organizers asked for a longer period of time to impose the mill levy. They asked for instead that the term of the debt be limited to 30 years. Okay, so they could issue debt, and if you look at their model service plan, well, at least originally it was proposing 2 issuances of debt. But if they issue debt in 2020, it could be a 30-year term. They could also issue debt again in 2030 for another 30-year term, for having 40 years total of taxation. So that is a change from the model service plan that limits the amount of the years of taxation to 30 years. They also did put in there that the latest time for issuing debt would be December 2040. So you take 2040 and then you go 30 years out, so you're really looking at 2070 as the latest year that debt would be imposed under the service plan, unless the town board consents to allow them to issue debt to impose a mill levy for a longer period of time. Another thing that was different about this service plan is the development agreement that the town already has with the developer. And we wanted to make sure that the town was protected in the event of various items happening. One of which I was concerned about is if the property reverted back to the town under the development agreement. So District Number 1 is composed of the property that's the restricted property under the development agreement. If the developer fails to construct the ball fields, the first one by 2020, March 2020, which is coming up, the second one by March 2022, then that property might revert back to the town. And there's also a requirement that that property be kept for public recreation uses, and if it's not kept for those uses, again, it could revert back to the town. So we did put in some, we recommended, and the district agreed to put some language in here that says that the district would not have the ability to impose a payment in lieu of taxes upon the town or our capital improvement fee upon the town if the property reverted back to the town. So we just wanted to make sure that in the event you end up owning that property, there wasn't a fee that the districts would be able to impose upon you. And that language is also incorporated into the IGA. It's even a little broader in the IGA to say that they can't impose any fees other than the fees that are set forth in the development agreement. Because that development agreement already has a cost sharing for the cost of maintaining the property, and those deal points have already been fully negotiated. So we didn't want you to be obligated to pay any additional costs to the district beyond those fees. So those are the main points of the service plan. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Question on number 2 of your deviations
Okay.
about the length and term. So that's saying they don't have to issue debt right away,
Right,
and when they do, they impose it for 30 years.
right.
So there won't be a longer term than 30 years, just it depends on when it's imposed.
Well, there could be a longer term because they could have 2 issuance. So if
Okay,
they,
yeah.
for instance, develop the
Half of
property in
it.
phases, yeah, they could do one in 2020, one in 2030, and then it would be 40 years of a mill levy. And that's what they had originally proposed in the service plan. So yes, it is possible that it could be more than a 30-year of a mill levy on the property. Now, one of the reasons that wasn't as concerning is because the property is commercial, but that it's a deviation from your model
Yeah.
service plan.
But they can't ask for anything beyond 2040, is that correct?
They can't issue debt beyond 2040,
Okay.
but beyond that point, other than a refinancing, but they could issue debt in December 2040 and then it would go another 30 years.
Oh, okay.
And then you talked about their imposing the 1% and 3% fee.
Correct.
And they could choose not to do that.
Right.
But that really doesn't concern us so much because no one's going to issue debt if they don't have the revenue, right? I mean,
Right, and right, so that was a great question to ask the district's attorney as to what happens if that doesn't play out. Because that really, it's a projection at this point that they're projecting that revenue stream will be available, but he can answer that question as to what it would happen to the financing. Most likely they would issue a smaller issuance, so when they go out to the market to sell the bonds, they do make representations to the bondholders as to what those revenue streams are, and then the bondholders assess the risk and see if they want to buy them. So they have to limit it to what the market's willing to bear.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Would you like them to come forward to
No, I-
answer that, or no? Okay.
Okay.
Other questions, Dr. Jones?
Yeah, you mentioned this capital improvement fee. Now, is that included in the mill levy? Is that included in these retail fees, lodging fees, or is this still another fee?
Still another fee. A capital improvement fee is imposed by the district directly as opposed to the retail fee and the lodging fee that are imposed by the developer. So the district is authorized to impose a capital improvement fee, which is usually paid at the time of certificate of occupancy, so it's paid by the developer, and then that goes towards repaying the bond. It is not included in the financial plan, so you can ask, again, the district's attorney what role that's expected to play, but according to the service plan, they absolutely can, and there's not a limitation on the amount of that capital improvement fee. So again, it would depend on what they think the market will bear.
Okay, and all the rec part of this district, which is half of it, 50 acres,
Right.
that will pay the 32 or 34 mil assessment as well as the commercial part, is that correct?
Sure, so it depends on who owns the property. If the property is owned by the town, then the town is obviously tax exempt, so it would not pay that mill levy. If the property is owned by the developer, then yes, it would pay the tax. It would be assessed, I believe, as commercial, and they would be paying that. It may even be more than 50%. 50% is the portion that would revert back to the town under certain conditions, but for instance, the stadium is on the other 50 acres. So the amount that's for commercial, for recreation uses is actually, would be greater than 50% under the current proposal.
And you say the recreation, if they own the recreation part, it's assessed at commercial rates?
Yeah, it just depends on if it's in private ownership or public ownership. And when I asked the question, I believe that the proposal is that it would be in private ownership. That was the answer I received from the district's attorney. That's what they believe the current plan is. But were it owned by either the district or the town, it would become tax exempt.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Sosowski?
Well, I guess I had one overarching question that.
No problem.
And I think it may well be addressed by Mr. Ankley, given what you've stated already. One of the, because I assume that the town has this duty to make sure that a special district submitting a service plan in a model, cash flow model, is really to make sure that the town is looking it over, making sure it has a viable project, one that will be able to be completed within the financial plan.
Right,
And-
yes, you'll have an ordinance is the second thing you'll be considering, and that has the criteria that you have to consider. And one of the criteria is that the proposed districts are capable of providing economic and sufficient services to the area they intend upon serving. So that is one of the findings you will be asked to make.
Sure, and I guess what sort of bothers me in that regard is
Yeah.
what we have been presented is a bond debt service table and a financing plan that is based on the $44 million bond. And that bond debt service model shows the mill levy at 34 plus the retail fee plus the lodging fee.
Right.
So the financial model is only viable if those two fees are in fact imposed at the 1% and 3%.
Yep.
But in fact, we know that they are not, that those are optional. In fact, there's no firm commitment or obligation to impose those fees.
Right.
The only thing that we know is that they will have up to 34 mills available for debt service. So we would be approving a project with a financial plan that is not mandatory, with a financial plan and fees and a revenue stream that is not obligated anywhere in the service agreement.
Okay.
I was curious why we didn't at least see a secondary set of exhibits that said, if in fact the retail fee and the lodging fee are not imposed, then your debt service, really your debt amount can only be X based on 34 mills.
Right.
And if that X in fact is 32.5 million, which is the project cost, then maybe the deal works anyway, with or without those fees. I think we have to almost assume, because there's no obligation to impose those fees, that they may not exist.
They absolutely may not exist. So a financial plan is always going to be a projection. And it's also based on what the projected assessed valuation is. If it doesn't build out or it doesn't build out in the time frame that's expected and the assessed valuation is not what is projected in here, then the mill levy's revenues will not be what's projected either. So it's a projection and of what the financial plan would be, but the district has a lot of flexibility under the service plan that they can adjust it up to those caps and up to the limits in the service plan. They can issue on different time frames. They can, issue a different amount of revenue. They can issue bonds in 2 different phases. So they have a lot of flexibility. So what I would say to that is anytime a service plan is presented in front of you, you are assuming that you're reviewing it based on the assumptions provided by the developer as to what's going to happen in the future. And so it's definitely a good idea to take a close look at those assumptions, and those are questions you could ask to the district's attorney as to how those assumptions came up. But there's always going to be a lot of assumptions, And it's not an ironclad, there's no way that it's a guarantee by the town that they're gonna have the revenue. You're just making your best assessment based on what they've presented, that if their assumptions carry through, will they have the ability to discharge the debt?
I guess I understand that, and the assessed rate, and gosh knows what will happen going forward. There is a
That's
risk
right.
of that.
That's right.
But we've been given a financial model that relies on, for its success in debt service, on fees that are simply not required under the deal. And
Yeah.
I'm struggling with why we wouldn't see without those fees if the deal cash flows.
That's a great comment, and that is one of the comments that I raised to the district's attorney, and that is the reason why we at least have the letter from the developer, and that was as far as he was willing to go in terms of representations. But that's a good question for you to ask them, and if you feel that you need more additional support, you can conditionally approve a service plan or ask for changes. That's within your venue.
And I'm curious on the financial model, there's, I think in both of those fees, there were two different columns where it referenced a share of. And one was S period, O period, which I assume meant share of. The other one actually said shares, the district's share of certain revenues. And
Right.
my question, I guess I'd pose is, share implies that there's another party involved who gets the other part. And I didn't know if that was implying that shared with whom, I guess was.
Right, no, that's not what the intent is. What the intent is if you look at that, it's the first page of the financial plan, and
Can you reference what page? what
Let's
page
see.
you're on, so we can-
It's page 73 of our packet.
okay, yeah, I don't know the packet page. Okay, great, thank you. So the reference to SO there, where it says district SO taxes collected, that actually refers to specific ownership taxes. So when you go and purchase a vehicle, you have to pay a specific ownership tax on the vehicle.
Right?
And then the county will distribute it in proportion to the amount of mill levy imposed by each district. So that's where that SO comes from. So that is collected and paid along with the mill levy revenues. So that one is, if they issue the mill levy, that's pretty secure. I mean, the amount of vehicle sales may go up and down, but that's a pretty firm revenue source. And then in terms of the district's share, so if you look at the next line that says annual sales revenue inflated at 1%, that's their projection of all of the sales within the boundaries of the district, okay? So the next line then will say district's share of annual project retail fee, 1%. My understanding was that that was 1% of the previous column, which was the total sales.
Right.
I guess that's a question for the district's attorney. I'm not aware that the developer is planning to impose an additional fee and keep it for another purpose. But,
It sounds, because the word
Okay.
share is used, obviously there
right,
are two people to share.
that'd be a great question to ask. I just interpreted that to mean that's the
Are they
percentage of
present
the.
this evening, where they could
There.
come forward?
The district attorney is here, yes.
Okay. Yeah, would you want to come forward and answer this question while we have it before us?
Let me make sure that I'm following the question. My name is Bill Ankley. I'm with White Bear, Ankley, Tanaka, and Waldron, and we help prepare the service plan. So we were talking about the line in the financing plan that has SO in it.
Well, no, he's asking about. He's asking about the line that says the district's share of the sales tax, or the
Retail fee.
retail fee. So he's asking, is there an additional retail fee that will be imposed but is given to someone else other than the district, either retained by the developer or to the town or to another party?
So we're talking about the project retail fee and the project lodging fee, the 1% and the 3%. And that is a fee that is imposed by the property owner. The district doesn't have any say in the imposition of that fee as an entity because it's a landowner imposed fee. And so the way this works is the developer, landowner, will draft a covenant that will be recorded against the property and will run with the land that will impose this fee and require
the 1% retail fee to be paid by businesses that are engaging in transactions that are subject to sales tax in the town of Windsor. It'll be essentially an additional fee on top of those transactions. And then the lodging fee is a 3% fee on the lodging activities that occur within the town. The developer, or the declarant, technically is the term for the person recording the covenant, has the rights to receive that fee as the private property owner. It's the property owner's dominion, it's the property owner's right to impose the fee, and the property owner's right to receive the fee. To the extent that that fee is useful in supporting municipal bonds issued by the districts, as is being proposed here, then you'll see that fee being assigned or pledged by the developer at the time that bonds are issued, either directly to the issuing district or sometimes to the bond trustee, to ensure that there's a reliable source of revenue upon which the bonding can be sized. It doesn't have to be 100%, and it hasn't been determined what percentage will be necessary at this point in time. But we wanted to establish an additional revenue stream that would provide additional oomph beyond the property taxes. Town of Windsor has a lower debt service mill levy that's permitted than what we often see around the state. We see 50 mills as a kind of typical maximum debt service mill levy. When this model service plan was done, it was really motivated by concerns over residential properties that would be paying property taxes, and so there wasn't an appetite to have that mill levy be up at the 50 mil level. It's down at the 34 mil level, and so we're looking for other revenues to help support additional tax exempt bonds, which are a more efficient way to gain financing for the project. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question. I hope I answered it.
No, you did, and I'm suspecting the word share in there is intended to mean that the declarant may well impose a 2% fee, but they're only going to pledge up to 1%.
All that we've talked about, I can tell you, is a 1%
Sure.
and a 3%, but it's totally up to the property owner what they want to do with respect to their property. I mean, there comes a point at which imposing too high a fee is going to be, a negative, so that's always a factor.
I guess Mr. Ankley.
Continue.
Oh, sorry.
No, continue with your
Just,
questions, Mr. Selesky.
I just wondered if you had a response to kind of one of my concerns, as I said, in terms of the financial model. We know the project cost is estimated at $32.5. Obviously, that's based on just a two-dimensional drawing. At this point, there's no construction drawings, so it's a guesstimate, high level. But the models, financing models, are really looking at a $44 million bond. And that debt service is really by 2 fees. So the question really to you is, should we in fact see what the debt service model would look like if in fact those fees were not imposed and all you had was 34 mils? Will it support at least a $32.5 million bond?
And picking up the theme that Carolyn started with in regard to that, every district that we bring before boards like yourselves is always has to have a financing plan that has got to be based on assumptions, because we don't have the actual development there to know. And so what we try to do is construct a financing plan that is based on what the project is supposed to look like in the future, assigning values to that future development, so then we have a resulting assessed value, and then we can determine based on your limited mill levy what the revenue streams are going to be. We also, and so that's an assumption. I mean, even the property tax component of this financing plan is it's an assumption that there's a certain amount of development that's going to occur over a certain period of time, and that's going to produce assessed value that will produce these revenues. Same thing is going to be true with the 1% PIF, project retail fee, and the project lodging fee. you know, the development will determine how much of that fee is actually available for financing. So to me, you look at property taxes, you look at the project fee, they're both subject to being different from what we're projecting. And I don't know, we could vary multiple different assumptions we've made in the service plan and be wrong. And so what we've tried to do is take what we believe would be a necessary amount of revenue to produce the dollars needed to build the public infrastructure and get that from a combination of property taxes and these fees, overlaying that with the projections about when the development will occur, when the assessed value will show up, and therefore when the fees arrive. So as the integrity of the financing plan depends on these assumptions. It always will. We'll never know until we actually get to the financing. The way your model service plan works, though, because you've limited your property tax mill levy for debt service for 34 mills, it is self-regulating in terms of the resulting amount of debt that you're going to be able to issue. And so if you have certain revenue streams that are not available that were projected in the financing plan, which work and show that we have the ability to finance $44 million worth of bonds, if those assumptions don't work out, then we're automatically reducing the amount of bonds, the amount of funding that we can get through tax-exempt bonds, which will just make the developer need to fund more on the private side. So it's the beauty of having a model service plan that has these caps in it, the mill levy cap in it, is that it does self-regulate and it prevents an overissuance situation and runaway mill levies.
Anything further?
Yeah, blind faith, I think is the word that
Okay.
I'm working at.
Okay, Dr. Jones.
You said these fees are optional for the retailer, is that correct? They can charge them or they don't have to?
So if the developer records a covenant imposing this project fee on retailers, in order for it to be a bondable revenue stream, it needs to be a commitment that is enforceable on the retailers. And this type of fee is in use in many different commercial retail developments. I don't know if you're familiar with the Simon Premium Outlets Mall that just opened a little while ago in Thornton. There's they call it a public improvement fee in that project. And you have to build requirements on the retailers, or actually on the owners of the building that then lease to retailers, that they will ensure that their retailers include the appropriate additional charge on their transactions. And there's a fairly well established industry out there of accountants that we engage to assist with the monitoring of the dollars that are being produced, make sure that the full amount of the fee is collected by the retailers, and there's enforcement mechanisms against the owner if the retailer doesn't pass those monies along. And it's worked quite smoothly in my experience. We issued $20+ million worth of bonds in the Simon Premium Outlets project, which are almost fully dependent on the public improvement fee, and it's working quite well.
So it's not totally optional. In order to meet your debt service, you're going to be counting on those fees if that's the way you work your agreements, right?
That's correct. What's optional is whether the developer decides to implement that fee. But once it's implemented, then in order for it to be a bondable revenue stream, it's got to be reliable. You have to know you can collect it.
Mr. Baker.
Is there a chance those fees would be implemented but not needed for debt service? And what would happen to the money then?
Well, the law on the topic is that if you are going to impose a fee like that, you have to apply the revenues received from that fee to the benefit of the property that is paying it. So whether it happens through those fees being pledged to Metro District bonds and having the benefit work itself out that way, or whether if they're not all needed for the Metro District bonds and there's some money left over, the developer can't just go pocket the money and, you know, and buy airplanes. I mean, it's got to go back into the ground. It's got to have some, they call it touching and concerning the property burden.
Okay, so in regards to the capital improvement fee, that's not part of your financials, that's my understanding?
It's not right now.
So were that to be imposed, where does that money go?
So the capital improvement fee would be, in contrast to the public or project improvement fee, is a governmentally imposed charge. So the Metro District would impose that fee. And that money would have to be used for district eligible capital costs. So usually that takes the form of those capital improvement fees being pledged in support of the bonds. But it can also sometimes be used for direct capital costs.
So like the other retail fee, it must go back into the project, it's
Yes.
not for jets.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I think my questions are probably more for Ms. Stucker. Did I hear you right? So there's actually 2 service plans.
There's one service plan, there are 2 metropolitan districts, District Number 1 and
But-
District 2.
But they're identical.
Yes, and it's one service plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
so-
both metropolitan districts, 1
Right.
and 2,
Yes.
are identical, but they will just be phased in maybe at different periods of time? Is that?
They're each 50 acres of property,
Right.
and I can let you speak as to why it's set up with 2 districts. I think one of the reasons is that one of the districts consists of the property that's restricted under the development agreement, so that was one of the reasons why they're separate. But they are both planned to be this kind of commercial and recreational use. They both have the same debt limitation. It's a combined debt limitation. Together, they cannot exceed that limitation of $40 million in debt. And they are both subject to the same mill levy limitations, and so all of the restrictions that we've talked about apply equally to both of the districts.
Okay, and if the town were to implement their own lodging tax fee, would this lodging fee preclude the town from what we wanted to do?
It would not. They would overlap on each other because since this is a developer imposed covenant fee, it's not related to taxing capacity.
That's really the same analogy applies to the sales tax. We have a sales tax figure. The sales tax or the retail fee that we've been talking about would be in addition. It wouldn't offset our taxes.
Correct.
Okay. Any final questions from town board members? Dr.
Just one
Jones?
more. I guess this is like other metro districts. If the developer wants to increase the mill levy, he'd have to get approval from us, correct? Town board.
Yes, if he wanted, so you're talking about the rate beyond 34 mils? Yes. So if he wanted to go beyond 34 mils for the debt service or 39 mils combined, that would be a material modification of the service plan. They'd have to come back before you and amend the service plan to make that change. In terms of the debt limitation of $40 million, that is, again, they would have to come before the town board if they want to go above the 40 million. There is a provision in here that says if it's only a 25% increase, it can be done without actually amending the service plan, but it still needs town approval.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Sosowski?
No, I guess just one comment, because I
Yeah.
certainly, looking at that 34 mills and started thinking about Gallagher adjustments and where do we end up, and realized suddenly, it's commercial property, yay, okay. So it's 29% valuation and. so-
Right, unless they end up undoing Gallagher and,
Right.
everything changes. But right now, so it does have that language in there that says if
Right.
there's an adjustment to the way that the assessed valuation is determined, then they can adjust the mill levies appropriately.
It looks like the project representative did you want to come before
Okay.
us, Mr. Spielberg?
It's good to see everybody. Obviously, thanks for your time as always. I figure without a baseball game, I would rather be nowhere else but here with you guys. Mr. Sislowski, I appreciate the blind faith sentiment. I'm here to tell you it's not blind faith. The reason why we're putting Metro District together and why we're doing this is because we want to deliver on what we said we were going to do, which was build fields, impact this community, bring commercial retail to that site, but leave a legacy behind. And that's what you guys have been a part of for a long time. It's why I'm standing here. It's why I have not ever wavered. I've not had blind faith. I've had absolute faith in this project. And the people staying behind me, if you start looking around and you recognize some of the faces, they're here for a reason, because they believe in it. They believe we'll be able to finance this and that it's a viable option and development that's going to make all of you guys proud. And so, again, thank you for listening to this. I know it's been a long time. We've spent a long time on this project, but we're going to get it done. And so I just wanted you to know that I'm here to make sure that we get this thing accomplished like we said we would. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any final questions from town board members? If not, this is the public hearing segment, so if there's anybody in the chambers who wish to approach the board on this subject item, this would be the opportunity to come forward. Okay, seeing none, we have everything we need, Mr. McCarter, to move forward?
It appears so.
Okay, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Sislowski to close public hearing. All in favor signify with yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 2, ordinance number 2019-1592. An ordinance approving Legends Sports Park Metropolitan District Service Plan. First reading, legislative action. Anything further, Mr. McCarter?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, anything further from town board members? Okay, so before then I seek a motion. I am going to be in support of this ordinance. I think as Mr. Spielberg has testified, and also the special counsel, this is a long time coming and awaiting, and I think this is the first move in the right direction to help solidify this program and this very special place that I think will be put Windsor on the map, so to speak, and will be a proud destination for all of northern Colorado. And we've done, what, about 25 of these special districts now? This is probably, or maybe even 30 something, I don't know. And so, I mean, it looks like you followed the initial model service plan. And so I certainly will be voting yes for this. And with that then, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1592.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson, approving ordinance 2019-1592. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution, or the ordinance, passes unanimously. Moving on to item 3, ordinance number 2019-1593, an ordinance raising the height limit of accessory structures exempt from building permits by repealing, amending, and replacing Windsor Municipal Code sections 16-8-30 subsection D and 18-2-10 International Building Code, IBC, section 105.2. First reading, legislative action.
And Mayor, so we had 2 versions. So the hard copy, we noticed on Friday that we didn't have the youth advisory editions. So your digital copy in your packet has that as item 3, but the hard copy somehow missed that. So
we're going to do advisory board next?
Well, unless you don't want to read all that stuff again, we could go in here.
Let's not amend the agenda to.
Okay, to put item 4 to 3 and reverse that order, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay. Do I need to take a vote then to reverse that order, or what should we do, Mr. McCarter?
Let's put it in the form of a motion to reverse the order of these 2 items, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
moved.
So moved?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sislowski with a second from Mr. Baker to change items, what are they?
3 to 3.
3 and 4 around, reverse those items. All in favor, vote yes, opposed, no. Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. So now we're voting on item 3 as amended, which is the raising the height limit of accessory structures. And Mr. Ballstead now will give presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are two ordinances on tonight's agenda. This first one, they both pertain to the adoption of the 2018 building codes that we passed earlier this summer. You'll recall that ordinance was passed with an effective date of October 1st. So we haven't been enforcing the 2018 codes yet, but we're getting close. And before we do, we identified 2 oversights that we made in that ordinance. And this first one, we had intended to amend the height of accessory storage sheds that can be constructed without the need for building permits from 8 feet in height maximum to 10 feet in height maximum. We've found over the last several years that a lot of the tough sheds and those types of things that are prefab that you get at Home Depot or other Lowe's, those kind of places, there are a lot of them are stock plans up to a 10-foot height, and there's no real need for building plan review or inspections. So we had intended to include this in the ordinance that you passed earlier this summer, but we just neglected to get it in there. So we're recommending approval of this ordinance to increase that height and to alleviate the need for building permits on those accessory structures of 120 square feet up to 10 feet in height.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ballstead? Okay. If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the board approve ordinance number 2019-1593.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Sislowski with a second from Mr. Renemeyer approving ordinance number 2019-1593. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on then to item 4 is an ordinance 2019-1591, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Windsor Municipal Code with respect to the addition of youth members to certain advisory boards serving the town of Windsor. Second reading legislative action, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I presented a couple weeks ago, we're presenting an ordinance that would open up membership on 3 different town advisory boards to youth membership. This is being basically in response to both the town board's interest in engaging our youth, as well as I think just an interest in this community to have an engaged citizenry. The youth members on these advisory boards would be in addition to the existing board composition, and so we would just be adding youth to each board versus replacing the youth with an adult member. Anybody between the ages of 14 to 18, so high school age youth would be eligible as long as they're Windsor residents and meet that age category. They could apply to be on these boards. So school district doesn't matter, homeschool doesn't matter, none of those other things matter. So as long as they're here and meet that age requirement. And then the advisory boards chosen for this effort, which are tree board, pre-cab, and water and sewer board, were chosen in part because they don't have quasi-judicial authority. I think everybody on this board understands that when you get quasi-judicial, you're dealing in more legal matters. It can be a little bit more controversial, and we didn't think that was necessarily appropriate for sophomores in high school to have these matters. So that's why these were chosen, and I would just say that each youth on these boards, they'd be full voting members, and so they would have the same voice as anybody else on the board, and then these would be one-year appointments. They would be eligible for reappointment up until they were 19 years old and, no longer eligible. So we're here to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Any questions, Dr. Jones?
Does this go into effect immediately, or is there a waiting period on it?
That's a great question. So yeah, I think that if the board adopts this evening, I've already reached out I talked to our superintendent last week. We've been in touch with the charter school. We're reaching out to the other schools to kind of get an outreach. And I think that we would try to time it out to maybe have applications due, maybe 1st to mid-October, and then have whoever on the board wanted to interview these folks maybe, 2nd, 3rd week of October, and make the appointment still this year.
Okay, because I received an email today from a 17-year-old charter school member who'd like to run for mayor, and I think
Yeah, I think
I
he's
might
right.
suggest that he started.
I think he's right behind me, Dr. Jones. I think he's in the audience, but
Hi.
yeah. Well, and he may, and he's also, I think has done his, every filing requirement to run for mayor. But yeah, he could be eligible for this as well.
Great.
Okay, any other
Sounds good.
questions? Okay, if not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1591.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer, the second from Mr. Wilson, and approving ordinance.
Excuse me,
2019.
Madam Mayor. You will require public comment before you actually call the question,
Okay,
however.
this is 1591.
It is second reading.
Okay. Is there anybody who wishes to come before the board on this agenda item? This would be the time. Okay, seeing none, we do have a motion on the floor from, I didn't write it down this time.
Yes.
From Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson? Okay, for 2019-1591, all in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance, I'm mixed up, is it an ordinance? The ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, ordinance number 2019-1594, an ordinance correcting Article 3, Chapter 18, International Residential Code by repealing, amending, and replacing Section R313, the automatic fire sprinklers system. First reading, legislative action, Mr. Balstead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the other item that we want to correct in the adoption of the 2018 building codes. Unlike the previous item, this item was discussed at length. You'll recall the direction town board gave us at that time was to apply the exemption of sprinkler requirements to single-family and duplex residential products. However, that didn't make it into the final draft ordinance, and so this is a clerical matter to clean that up and reflect the town board's direction. This would exempt single-family homes and duplexes from the sprinkler requirement at this time.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Balstead on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2019-1594.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Doc Jones approving ordinance 2019-1594. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6, finance report for July 2019. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam. In your packet is the July financial report. July being the 7th month of the year would make our benchmark for revenue and expenditures 58%. The revenue numbers are all have cleared that benchmark. Our retail sales tax is up 12.6% over 2018. By the end of July, the construction use tax, we collected nearly all of our annual budget amount, and that is due to the number of building permits that we have been issuing. So we almost collected, like I said, the entire budget. Same thing with the property tax. We have almost all of that collected by the end of July. That is not so unusual. We do that most every year, and we just get a little bit for the rest of the year, but predominantly through July. So that the collections there and the records we keep setting has through the July the revenue is far ahead of the expenditures. We have, for operation and maintenance, it's at 48.3% of the budget, capital at 17.7, for a combined 34.45% combined. Now the capital will start picking up here between now and the end of the year as we finish projects and write checks for them. If you look in the August list of bills that was in your packet, we wrote some pretty big checks in August. So I expect that to even out a little more as we get towards the end of the year. So I know you have an executive session, so I'll just keep it short here tonight, but I will answer any questions. Short of that, that is my report for July.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Moyer concerning the finance report this evening? If not, thank you as always for a great job and great news that we are continuing to do well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item D, communications from our town attorney.
Nothing other than that we do have the executive session here tonight.
Okay, communications from town staff. Anything further, Mr. Ballstad? Mr. Thornhill? Chief? Okay, communications from town manager.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, communications from town board. Okay, so just a couple of reminders. We do have our meeting here up in the chambers. I believe, are we going to meet in the chambers for the DDA combined joint meeting on the 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. We also have the groundbreaking from 11 to 11:30 on I-25 segment 6 groundbreaking. I think I might have said segment 5 earlier. So I think it's segment 6 actually. Severance High School is having an official groundbreaking and tour this Friday from 4:30 to 5:30. And then wanted to remind everybody.
I think it's Thursday.
Thursday.
I mean-
I think the
It's
Severance
Thursday.
High School is Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday, did I say Friday? Yeah, it's Thursday. We do have Hops for Hunger, which is this Friday, which goes to the Weld County Food Bank. And then next Saturday is Coffee with the Mayor at the Community Rec Center. And we're going to be talking about, that's the flooding anniversary from 2013. So we have the emergency folks from Weld and Larimer County who are going to be present for that as well. And I think that's about it. So with that, I would seek a motion to now move into an executive session.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4, E and I, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect to raw water dedications.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, is there a second? Dr. Jones? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to move into an executive session. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Motion approved unanimously, so we will take a brief adjournment for about 5 minutes and then we will move into executive session, and we do need to hear from Mr. Sislowski.
Thank you, Mayor. I did vote in favor of moving into executive session, but I am on the board of directors of the entity that may be involved with the item being discussed at the executive session. After discussing that with town attorney, Mr. McCarter and I agreed it would be best if I recuse myself from attendance.
Okay, so with that, we will excuse you so you can go home and
Watch the Broncos.
watch the Broncos. Well, we move into executive session in about 5 minutes.
I ended up